moment for Miriam to start the recording because we do have students joining us hybrid too. Perfect. Okay, wonderful. So today is our Human Resources and Management panel. So I want to welcome our 4 speakers. We have Kelly, Annie, Jonah, and Jennifer. So let's give them a round of applause. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Perfect. So we'll start with the first question. So if you wouldn't mind just telling us your full name, the name of your organization, and what your organization does.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annie MacLeod, and my organization is Chartered Professionals in Human Resources, Nova Scotia. We are actually national, and we do have our provincial chapters as well. And if you haven't heard of us before, that's okay. Unless you're in HR, you probably haven't. But we are an HR association for the province's HR professionals. So we provide, the biggest thing we provide is our designation. So similar, if you think about how accountants have the CPA, that's very similar for us with the CPHR designation as a chartered professional in human resources. And then stemming from that, we provide a lot of professional development and networking opportunities for our members, of which we have just under 1,000 now. I'm really excited about.
Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Munroe. I'm a registered dietitian and a CPHR candidate in human resources. I went here to the Mount for dietetics, and then I went back to school for human resources. I work for a company called Aramark. Aramark is a food service and support services company. We operate in about 19 countries around the world. We do food service and uniforms and utilities and all different sorts of things. And we operate at Dalhousie University and St. Mary's University here in Halifax.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonah, and I work with Placemaking 4G. In short, we call it P4G. It's a socially conscious recruitment firm. Our purpose is to inspire a values-driven climate. So we hire for contribution rather than fit. So we try to align people with jobs that speak to who they are as human beings. So yeah, I'm excited to talk more about the work that we do. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Carras. I'm the Director of Human Resources at the Westin, Nova Scotian, that very large hotel at the bottom of Hollis Street by the Superstore. The Westin is owned and operated by a hospitality group called Newcastle Hotels and Resorts, which is a US-based company that has properties both there and in Canada. So in addition to being Director of HR at the Westin, I'm also the Regional Director of HR for the Canadian properties, which are 6 right now in total. We're a hotel, we're in hospitality, so we're about creating memorable experiences for our guests, but for our staff as well. So in my role, I oversee a small team, and everything from the employee relations, labor management, working very closely with our union rep and our shop stewards, and then everything from implementing policy, and supporting and recognizing our staff. So a lot of emphasis on the employee engagement and the recognition side, and then recruitment and onboarding as well.
Great. Thank you all so much. So moving on to the next question, we're wondering a little bit about how and why you chose your current career field.
Well, that's a great question. I started in my role at the Westin in April of this year. Prior to that, I was living and working in Dublin, Ireland for a couple of years as an HR and quality manager for a private healthcare company. So the move to hospitality wasn't necessarily like the next logical step. However, early in my HR career, I'd worked for Casino Nova Scotia in a coordinator role, and the atmosphere, the environment, the hospitality of it all really stuck with me and made a lasting impression. So having recently come back to Nova Scotia, starting to look for opportunities here, when the opportunity at the Westin came up, it jumped out at me. And I've been sort of hit the ground running in April and haven't stopped, but it's been a good fit, and it sort of just happened naturally or by accident. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because maybe 2 years ago, I qualified as a chartered professional accountant, but I noticed the aspects of my job I enjoyed the most were people related. So I made the conscious decision to switch my career after 5 years into something more people related. And at the core of it, I wanted to connect people to jobs. I feed off people's energies. I wanted to be able to interact with people as like my day-to-day job. So went, and then the pandemic came and it sped up a process that I thought would be about 2 years, ended up being like 9 months. Thankfully, I had a BCom, so there was a lot of transferable things that I could do. I recently also moved to Halifax about 6 months ago. Simply again, I love the job that I do. I love the people that I get to connect with. And I think that was the biggest move for me, to be able to interact with people on a daily. Of course, human resources has different aspects in it, but I wanted that recruitment part. I also do facilitation. So one of my favorite courses was training and development. I've always been a TA, and at the core of it, I enjoyed just like seeing when someone learns something new. So I wanted to make a career out of it. And so that's where we are now. Thank you.
Me too. No, I did. I started my career as a registered dietitian. I went to the Mount. I did my internship. I'm still have my license as a registered dietitian, but I started in the clinical field and didn't care for it, and then ended up with Aramark, who let me spread my wings and grow. And I got to really grow into these roles that I wouldn't have traditionally had the opportunity to be in. And after a little while, our human resources manager left, and some of those duties were piled on to me as you know, they happen. And I really enjoyed it. And I was lucky enough to have a fantastic mentor who encouraged me and kept pushing me. And then eventually I just went back to school. So I've only been in human resources truly for the last 3 or 4 years. But through that time, I started as a coordinator, and now I'm a specialist, and going to be a generalist this month. So yeah, it was wonderful, but highly recommend.
Yeah, I may be a little biased because it's my organization, but yeah, it is a wonderful profession, and we do sort of fall into it accidentally, I think, when we love people so much. I have a very similar story. I actually graduated from the business program at the Mount with a concentration in tourism way back in 2009. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and HR was not even on my radar. And so my friend said, "Hey, come over to this, this call center. You can figure out what you want to do and make some good money in the meantime." And I made it 4 months before I said, "Oh my God, I hate this. What am I going to do?" And a position became available in what was at the time a very small recruitment team. And I said, "You know what, I'm going to go for it. I love working with people. I think this would be great. And if I don't get it, I'll stay long enough that it doesn't look like I just left because I didn't get this job." So I started in recruitment, and very quickly from there, the company grew like crazy, which meant my role grew and blossomed into an entire HR generalist career. And then fast forward a decade, and I, ended up experiencing all different functions of HR in that role, getting lots of different challenges and opportunities. I never ended up leaving that employer until they eliminated my position, because I just kept getting new challenges and things. And I even got as far as leadership before realizing that, holy mama, that's not for me. And now here I am after reevaluating. I went through so much burnout, as lots of HR professionals have, in my last 2 years at my last position. I was doing really complex, really icky stuff. And I had to step back and think, like, do I even actually like this anymore? Where's the fun parts of HR that I fell in love with? And so luckily, the position became available in this organization that I've been a member of for so many years. And I've always loved sharing my learnings and professional development. I would always take that back to my team and share that. And that's very much what my job is now. So as the manager of marketing and events, That's what I do. I create and manage our professional development calendar, our marketing and branding, and hopefully enticing people to those events. And I get to do things like this too, which I've never done before. So go easy on me. It's my first panel. But I'm back in the fun part of HR again, and it's such a joy to be able to provide these opportunities for the members that were my peers for so long, that help them grow and enrich their careers too. And I hope I get to do it forever.
Thank you all so much. I think it's really interesting how none of you just said, oh, I went to the Mount and I did a human resources degree and I went right into HR, you know, very different backgrounds. And I know our students are all from very different educational backgrounds as well. So the term HR and management can cover quite a large variety of things. We are sort of wondering about some specific management duties that you do on a day-to-day basis that you could share with us.
I have no problem speaking, and I often end up being the first one that talks and too long. So you guys just elbow me if you need me to shut up. So my role is a bit unique because I don't actually have a team of people that I manage in that traditional kind of leadership sense, which is good because it's not my jam. But my role really involves a lot of marketing strategy, a lot of professional development strategy, things like that. So when I look at our calendar and setting what the schedule is going to be for the year, I really have to stay close to what our members are interested in, you know. So a lot of my role involves getting out there and staying connected to our profession and our members and what they're looking for, what are their gaps in their professional development. And so I've got to stay on top of those outside factors, and then I have to manage that strategy appropriately. So I do lead the events as well. So I play a little bit of that project manager role when it comes to we have a big showcase event every year it'll be in June this year, but we have our big annual conference that I'm not at all shaking in my boots about planning for my first time, you guys. I've got this. But that's my role too, is, you know, again, looking at, you know, what are some of those things that we need to be factoring in? How can I take these to the next level? And really owning that, getting my team motivated and enthusiastic about stepping in. I say that I don't have a team that I'm responsible for, but we are a small team of 4. So when we do have our large events, we really all have to come together as a team that way. And so it's my job to kind of keep everybody on task and help everybody understand the vision, what we're doing, and how, you know, the piece that they've taken is really contributing to that. So those are kind of the key things. Like I said, I'm more of a functional manager that way, and it really revolves around strategy and making sure as well that we keep our alignment with our national brand where we need to as well. So making sure I'm really connected to our wider world of HR professionals.
For me, same as Annie, I don't have any direct reports, but in terms of responsibility, same sort of thing. We have about 300 employees between managers, supervisors that I manage at Dalhousie University. So that's my home base for Aramark. Yes, so definitely responsible for that bigger picture. What I find with managing in human resources is that the managers and the directors and the senior leadership team often are focused on their own pieces, right? They're focused on the budget and the food cost and labor cost and all of these sorts of things. And it's my job to sort of take a big step back and say, okay, well, yes, we have a lot of these issues that you're looking at, but have you ever thought of treating, you know, the disease rather than the symptoms, which is something that I work around a lot. So getting feedback from the employees, from the managers, and constantly looking for ways to improve our experience for, you know, both the people that we serve, but the people that work with us every day. So really improving that employee experience and engagement. And then, of course, in human resources, there's always like those HRIS systems. So you know, making sure that people get hired and onboarded, and then teaching the managers how to do all of the tasks so that, you know, we can kind of delegate sort of some of those things. And one of the biggest things that I find, having been in this company for 7, 8 years now, is that if you have the opportunity to learn something, even if you think it has absolutely nothing to do with what your task is, then learn it. You know, I know how to use like Chronos, which is our time management system. And I know how to use Primo, which is our menu management system. And I have no business understanding how to use those things, But it helps me to understand that employee experience, that manager experience. And then if people have questions like, oh, why isn't my employee showing up in my time management system? Like, oh, well, have you, assigned them a work area? This is how you would go about doing that. So I think when you have tools and resources available to you, then that learning and growth is something that you can, it's infectious, and you can have that sort of culture where you're constantly driving people to learn more and do more. And then my job as HR as well is to be that voice of calm and reason when managers come to me panicking, saying this person's doing this and we have to fire them right away, and say, okay, well, maybe perhaps we need to take a step back and, cooler heads will prevail. Why don't we think about this? We're going to think about some strategies. So that's a big part of what I do as well, is that employee management, performance management, making sure that we're doing what is right. We're also a unionized environment, so making sure that we're within the collective bargaining agreement, making sure that we're doing everything that we're supposed to there, and kind of keeping the managers on the rails. We have a really unique function right now where a lot of our leadership team is very new, like less than a year within the service. So it's again, trying to keep them within labor standards, union standards, and making sure that they're making good decisions for themselves and avoiding everyone burning out. Which I'm a hypocrite about, because then I burn myself out, not burning other people out. When they're like, Kelly, you were emailing me at 4:30 in the morning. I'm like, shh.
Classic HR professional. Here
Right.
we go.
But that means that you didn't have to email at 4:30 in the morning. So do as I say, not as I do.
There's so many interesting things that people have mentioned, but like Megan said, HR in itself, I always think that over 5 or 6 different categories. So there's recruitment, there's administrative stuff where you have to really fire or or discipline someone for something that they may have done. There's also an aspect of learning and development. You don't want to go into a job where there's no path for growth. So there, again, it's a career within HR where you could solely focus on learning and development. There's a lot more different things. I know for myself, the ones that spoke to me were compensation, because who doesn't love money? But also my background as an accountant. I joined a recruitment firm that has a team of just 10 people. So someone had to do payroll, you wear a lot of many hats in a startup like that. So the numbers came in handy, and for anyone that has done accounting, payroll is nothing compared to accounting. It's simple math anyway. So I use that experience like that. Right now, I have one direct report, but I always think when it comes to management, I guess, of people, the key concept I think about, and I hear a lot of people saying this, is I empower people. And I'm like, everyone has that power within them. And I loved when, Kelly, you mentioned I had a mentor and things like that. Those are people that help you see that potential. So like I said, I was an accountant a couple of years ago. I don't like reliving that because I hated my job. But one of the people that actually approached me to start thinking about a career in human resources was our CEO at the time. He said, I started a company volunteer program because I felt like I needed more in the work that I did. So I pitched the idea, and he was like, if you think you can run with it, I'll be behind you. And that's like the best thing you want. And as I did that, I just noticed, oh my God, I love this. And he was like, you should go back to school and do some bit of like HR. And I ended up transitioning my career like that. But I always think, when you're managing people, it's about either removing those blocks that may stop them from reaching that potential, or sometimes encouraging someone or helping them see where, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. I know I'm very good at like organization, time management, and things like that. So that is like a strength when it comes to recruitment process, just maintaining and making that candidate experience really pleasurable for them. I've been on the other side where you don't want to be ghosted. You want to hear as soon as possible and things like that. So I try as much to make that experience interesting for them. There are few other things I'm not good at. We won't get into that, but of course, that is when I lean on my team member and I'm like, okay, like help me out with this. Actually, today I had to prepare like a slide presentation. I'm not creative. I know the numbers. I think I have a lot of things in my head, but I can't bring it to life. So I was like, you know what, just help me make a colorful spreadsheet and, you know, I could talk to it. But that is where you know where your limitations are. And I know like she's very good at doing something like that. And I see sometimes when I'm like, okay, like now that you've built it, do you want to do a presentation? And I know it's scary, but sometimes you have to get out of your comfort zone to learn. So when you think of management of people, sometimes it's about pushing others, sometimes it's about removing those blocks. So yeah, that's it.
It's hard to describe or categorize my day to day probably, but I would say, you know, I often think of HR as firefighting, regardless of whether you're in, you know, recruitment or if you're in a generalist role, you know, there's more so than perhaps some other professions, the volume of the day-to-day unexpected is kind of astronomical a lot of the time, and it just comes out of left field and you get used to that, and so you're able to roll with that more and more as time goes on. So I think a lot of my role is firefighting, and I think I don't need to tell all of you that hospitality and food service in particular through COVID were hit extremely hard. And so coming out of that on this side of things has put the hotel and all hotels in a really interesting, exciting, but challenging place, you know, in terms of staffing and in terms of all of a sudden being back up to 100% occupancy. So, you know, amidst all of that, my day-to-day right now, there's a lot of project work going on, although that has often been sort of backburnered of late because we need to focus on the recruitment and the retention and really getting outside the box and thinking in new ways about how we can attract and bring people to the organization, because it's a fantastic place to work. One of the projects I'm working on right now that's sort of top priority is regarding the Atlantic immigration program. So we got our designation through as an employer in September. And so learning as much as possible and working through the weeds of that and making sure that existing staff members who need to kind of pursue their residency through that program, that we're supporting them, getting the documentation together. So that's a big piece of work right now. Overseeing my two team members who, you know, we're a small but mighty team. And so, you know, that payroll is happening, that onboarding is happening, that, you know, that they feel supported in their roles is a big piece. Employee recognition and engagement is obviously a big piece. Again, tying that to the retention, you know, looking at new and exciting ways of how we can attract and keep people, and the realities of immigration and sponsorship and all of those pieces that are becoming more and more prevalent, you know, and then in terms of regionally, you know, supporting those select service hotels where there isn't HR on site, there is a general manager. And so giving them support, touching base with them, you know, and then it's implementation of policy and it's communication and it's memos. And it's just really trying to bring the hotel back to not what it was before COVID, because none of us are going back, but to a new exciting place and kind of helping bring them back to, to full capacity in terms of staffing to match the full capacity occupancy that we've been seeing. So it's a very exciting time, but it is a lot of unknowns day to day, I would say.
That is super cool about the immigration program. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Our next question is, most of us as students will be entering our career sooner rather than later. And we will be going into entry-level roles, but we were wondering if you were looking at the hiring table and you're looking at promoting one of the students, what would be some factors you would consider about someone to promote them to a level of management?
I've been thinking about this because you sent the questions out ahead of time, and there's a lot of intangibles that play a part in any decision like that. But I would say for me, through my career and bringing people up into those supervisory or management level roles, be consistent. You're working hard, but consistency is such an undervalued, underrated quality that is just so valuable. Strong communication skills, written and oral, the follow-up, if you're behind on something or you need help, making sure that you're being vocal about that and assertive about that, but also, hey, I can't get this today, but I will have it to you by end of the week, as opposed to just not communicating. Those little things may seem small and insignificant in the grand scale of what can be a very busy day, but someone who takes the time to make those pieces known and to be in communication it's just so important and so valued and so appreciated. And just some basic things like timeliness, reliability, those you can learn new things. There's always more to learn. There's always more training to be had. But taking the initiative, showing that you're interested, going the extra step, being reliable, those are the things that you can consistently do at whatever level you're in that really demonstrate to others that you are serious, that you mean business, that they can count on you, that you're leading by example. And that's kind of what we're looking for when we're moving someone into that role, someone who can lead by example, who can motivate and inspire others and just set that tone that you're looking for. So I would say those to me are some of the big factors.
I think there's nothing left for me to say. I'm just kidding. You know what? One of the things that I really believe in is competence builds confidence. So if it's your work that you're doing or whatever has been put in front of you, do it to the very best of your ability. I know you will never have a regret when you know you did the best that you could. And I love the part when you mentioned just like communication. I see a lot of resumes. So if you ever apply for a role through P4G, I will see that resume. And a lot of people will say communication skills. And it's like that, the resume, the cover letter shows me your communication skills. And so it's one of those you can say it, but then like, how do you portray it, right? And you'll be surprised how many you read and you're like, oh, okay, like this is a choice. You decided to do it that way, but and it's I like regardless of how incomplete the application is, I always give it a look because again I've also been an applicant, so I'm like I know what people are going through, and you put in the time, whether it was 5 minutes or whatever time you did. So I also put in the time to be able to read that. But the other key thing I always think about is the interpersonal skills. I shared my story of how I ended up transitioning my career, but also the impact and the effect I had in an organization where I didn't have a title. A lot of times we think leader means I need to be director, I need to be like at the top. But I always think of an African proverb that always inspired me to do the work that I do. And it says, if you ever think you're too small to make a change, then you've never spent time with a mosquito. If you're in your bed and that little bugger is in there, you may not sleep. And so sometimes you may think, oh, like maybe I can't be able to do this, but like that's the part where I like about consistency. Little by little, step by step, as long as you're consistent in what you're doing, it's quite impactful in the work that you do. So, yeah.
Well, I don't know if I have anything left to say. But Jonah, you alluded to something actually that is always top of my mind when I'm looking at interviewing new managers, if I'm looking to promote someone, is that there are managers and then there are leaders. And I think that that's a really important distinction. And that's something that we look for, I personally look for when we're looking at promoting and hiring people. And the reason for that is that you can manage the business. We have a lot of people who are really competent and who can manage the food cost and who can manage the labor costs and who have their budgets and they have all their paperwork done. And that's beautiful. But at the end of the day, if you have a team of 30 people who you're managing and you're supposed to be leading, they see the work that you're doing, which is fantastic. But if they don't feel connected to you, if they don't have that sort of drive to work for you, if you're not inspiring them on a day-to-day basis, then you're not a leader, you're just a manager. And so you may be ticking all the boxes in terms of getting your work done, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that you are leading your people. So I think that that's one of the most important things. Of course, communication. Yes, we want to make sure that people can communicate. Jonah, I have a funny story that I want to say just around the resumes and cover letters, because I was reviewing some the other day and one of them said attention to detail and they spelled attention wrong. And I said, oh dear. But I mean, Jennifer, you already hit on it, is that we're at a place right now that is so unique in terms of recruitment because it's been the employer's market for such a long time. And now it's the employees market. And so things that we would have, bypassed people on before, we're starting to reach out and give people more of a chance. And, even people who their applications were incomplete or, they showed some promise on what they gave us, but not everything was there. We have this really cool sense of competition out there in the market right now, which is really challenging. And it's really hard to recruit for, especially frontline employees and skilled positions like cooks. But I think it's a really great opportunity for the employee market because it's going to drive that competition between employers to increase wages and to look at all of those things. And those are things that leaders need to consider. Managers may just be given the budget and do X, Y, and Z, but leaders are the people who zoom out and think of that big picture. And I think that that's just something that we need to consider.
Kelly, you almost took the words right out of my mouth. I agree with everything this whole panel has already said. And I think, yeah, it really does boil down to, for me, in my experience recruiting for managers and often new managers, their first time kind of stepping up into that role is, I want to see that you've got the big picture. You're at least paying attention to it. Like Kelly said, I used to call it meerkatting, so, everyone's kind of working away, but you're the one that's kind of standing up, looking out over the group going, but what's really going on? Like, how does what I am doing actually contribute to the overall success? Because I think the biggest thing when you're talking management and people management, the biggest thing to always bear in mind is that you don't have 100% control of your success like you do as an individual contributor. Your success is now that of others. And I'm sure we've all had crummy managers who, you can tell that they're just trying to climb that ladder. They want more money, they want more status, they want more power, and nobody likes working for that person. So fundamentally, before you even apply for that management position, you need to be considering why you want it in the first place. And that's really what I want to see. I can train you on how to do all the things, managing those functions and day-to-days, but what I can't do is change your personality. I can't give you a genuine desire to support and develop and help other people grow. I can't give you a genuine desire to want to inspire and motivate other people towards a common goal. You have to bring that to the table, and it doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if that's something that piques your interest, then you've got it, and I think that's the other thing I would say, when it comes to when we're recruiting for managers, especially, managers starting off in their leadership career, is there is no pressure to have all the answers. And in fact, going back to comparing, leader versus manager, leaders are often very capable of saying, I don't know, guys, folks, I should say, I don't know, folks, you're my team. You all have expertise in different areas. I don't know the answer here, but we're going to figure it out together. And I think oftentimes there is that pressure when you're new in your management role to feel like you kind of have to be the one on the team with all the answers. But it's really about inspiring your team and creating that environment where they feel comfortable to raise their ideas, to challenge you. Oftentimes, some of the coolest projects that I've done in my career come from me saying, here's what we're going to do, team, and them saying, what if we did something different here, or I don't think that's going to work because XYZ, and here's what I do think will work. And so it's really that humble factor. I think, it boils down to ego. If ego and status and compensation is your primary driving factor, then you need to be looking towards those functional management roles and not something that involves people leadership. Because at the end of the day, when you're taking that position, you can think of the obvious impacts you have on that individual directly, such as their compensation when you do their performance appraisals and things like that. But you hold, in a lot of ways, that person's satisfaction in their role in your hands. We always say people don't leave companies, they leave managers. And so if you're not at least interested in and happy to support other people and help them grow and have the icky conversations, if you're not going to have that at the forefront of your mind of how you impact the people that come in and report to you every day, then people leadership is probably something you want to kind of steer away from. And that's okay. If we had, maybe a glass of wine and 3 more hours, I would tell you about my experience learning that actually I'm not at all a leader. And then my experience trying to get to a place where that's okay. It doesn't mean that I failed. So I think it really boils down to, I want to know what motivates you to be a leader primarily. And if there's not at least an inkling of you care about people, then I'm probably going to put you more at the bottom of the barrel. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So we did definitely touch on this a little bit already, but I just wanted to hear how COVID and the pandemic has impacted and changed your industry. I feel like, Jennifer, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit over there with the tourism and hospitality, but yes, we'd love to hear.
I mean, it's how hasn't it changed it, I suppose, but good things will come from that in a weird way. You've got to look for some of those silver linings that this has forced us to, evaluate certain things and do things differently. And that's not always a bad thing. It's time consuming and it's trial and error sometimes, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. So we're just trying to still figure it out. I think, it's done a lot of things. It's changed. I mean, you think of the boom this summer, even if you consider tourism here and room rates, and I'm not speaking just at the Westin, but I'm speaking about hotel room rates in Halifax. I think Halifax, according to Marriott, is the 2nd highest room rates over the summer in the country, which when can you think of that Halifax would have been 2nd in the country for that? So, it's done things in that respect, but it's changing again, how we recruit. We, like a lot of industries, lost an incredible amount of staffing who used the time when they were off because we were closed to evaluate, what they wanted, what was going to work for them, what maybe gave them more security for their situation. And so a lot of people who were maybe long-time food service or, in the hospitality may have moved on to other career paths within that time. So we're now in a position, it sounds like others, where a lot of our leaders are new into those leader roles. Not all, but more than prior to COVID, and where so much of our staff team is brand new into the industry. So I think, that's different. And so how we're going to attract and retain has to be different. And then we, as I said, we're owned and operated by Newcastle Hotels and Resorts. So it's about navigating corporately as well, policies and what's different state to state, province to province. But then we're also a Westin, which means we're a Marriott franchise. So we have our Marriott brand standards too. So it's just changed everything. But I again think there's no going back. And so we need to look for those silver linings and use it as an opportunity to grow and develop and enhance what we're already doing. And that's exciting. So it comes with a lot of work, but it is really exciting. It's really driven a lot of our recruitment and immigration strategies, which I find incredibly exciting. We have a really diverse and dynamic team already, but that's only going to be amplified and increase in the coming months and years, which I think is going to be great.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. Based on our business model, the pandemic really changed how we do things, or I would not even say changed, but it really amplified how we do the work that we do. A lot of folks wanted or got the time to pause and think, you know what, we're not here for a long time, but we should be here for a good time. So I should be doing a job that I love. I should be doing a job that speaks to who I am at the very core of me, right? So now a lot of people, again, even when I think of like the recruitment process, we do Zoom calls and things like that. And you're getting insight into people's lives that normally you wouldn't, right? And it's that vulnerability that now people also have as they're going through the process. And so it changes the whole part where someone's like, now already you're inside my house, even though virtually. So I want to go into a job where I'm comfortable, I'm excited about what I want to do and things like that. So the premise of what we do, the things we do, is that when you go on work and you feel like, I'm fulfilling a passion, it doesn't feel like work at all. And a lot of people got that time for months to pause and really think, what do I want to do? What really speaks to me? And so we try to incorporate that throughout our process. So one of the things we actually do that I think is pretty cool is that before we actually even ever put out a job description or an ad, we speak with everyone within the company of what the culture is, not what is written on the wall and like what is written on the website. What do people actually feel is the company values? What do people actually feel is the purpose? Like where do they see that they fit in? And that helps us inform the job description, but also the profile of people that we bring in. Because we have a few clients where we're like, okay, that's good, but you need some bit of spice in the way you do things. Like if there's no one challenging you, there's no room for innovation, there's no room for growth. And I guess, unlike my panelists, we sit in a very privileged position because we're helping people get into the jobs that Jennifer and Kelly are looking to hire. So it's like, you choose what you really want to do because like you have all the power now. And so we kind of like break down and someone's like, no, I don't like that. I like this. So it helps in amplifying the work that we do because people have had that time to be like, okay, you know what? I have to think carefully of what I want to do. And again, just to wrap it up, we challenge the clients that we have because sometimes it's easy to want to stay with comfort. But when we speak to people and we're like, you need this profile of a candidate to elevate your business, to do something different, because again, we have spoken to people and people are like, oh, there's a question we always ask, what do you want to see? And then when we see an overarching theme in what people want, we're like, we're going to get you that because you need it. Everything else we see the profile, there's already that in there. And we bring in something. And many times we have repeat clients because they're like, oh, like that helped us. We started seeing things differently. And I always say, I have 2 brothers, 1 sister, but we were raised by the same parents, but we all think differently. So even when you're raised by the same folks, you still see the world in a totally different way. So trying to bring that all together makes magic. And I'll end by saying this. We all love diversity when you see different colors and everything is like colorful. But surprisingly, when it comes to human diversity, we hold back. But when you think of it, it's things like capitalism and things like that, which again, like Annie said, I would need a cup of wine for that. But yeah, like it's elevated the work that we do because a lot of us have now started thinking, okay, either what impact do I want to leave in this world? Like the work that I do, how does that feed my soul? we've talked about burnout, which is real in HR. Yesterday, I had to work up until 11 because again, I want to make the experience worth it for the candidates, and it involves scheduling people's meetings and everything. But because I love what I do, sometimes it doesn't feel like I'm working, which is probably something I was going to talk about later, but hey, it came out. So over to you, Kelly.
Exactly that. No, I love what I do, and it never feels like I'm working. I was working till 9:30 last night, and same thing. I was like, oh my goodness gracious. Okay, well, I need to go to bed now. But in terms of the pandemic, I mean, being in food service, much similar to the hospitality, to the hotels, everything shut down. It was like a polar bear dip, right? One day we were nice and cozy, warm, and the next day everything changed, and it was difficult. But I'm very proud of Aramark, who we work for. They were really fantastic in allowing the managers, the human resource folks, to work from home, to try and figure it all out together, to find a way to keep the people that matter the most to them. But through that, same thing, a lot of people who got laid off had that time to reflect and decided, I'm going to go back to school, or I'm going to do something else. And we lost such a key part of what makes our culture and what makes us who we are truly. Like, we're delivering those experiences to people every day. And these long-term employees decided, this isn't necessarily what I want to do with the rest of my life. And they left. And same thing with the managers. A lot of them had left. And then we came back and we were very innovative. It caused us to really take a closer look at the way that we do things, and can we do things a little bit differently to make that experience better. And we worked through COVID, and I know it's not over, but now with everyone back, it's that challenge of, all that experience that we took for granted in the past. Those people who would train our new employees, who would really bring and bridge the culture and make everything so wonderful every day. A lot of them are gone. And we have a lot of these folks who are lost in the world with us, who have just started, and, we're leaning on them to be experts, and they've only been with us for a year or two. And so we're trying to work through that piece of how do you train and develop a large group of people while you're operating at a high capacity through, September and October, which are really busy, as in higher education. And how do you train and develop and retain and engage those people when you really don't have that long-term experience? Right. And so that's one of the key things that I think happened through COVID. And again, the leadership, it's a lot of new faces, a lot of new people. We have, I think, the right fit when we talked about those leadership skills versus management skills, but they're still learning the business. They came from different places, and they have to learn about Aramark, about what the way that we do things. And it's going to take them some time to catch up, for sure. But we built trust with our clients during that time, which I think was really important. We build trust with the students, with the people that we work with. And now we just need to build trust with our new employees. But yeah, same thing. We're an AIP designated employer. We actually started with the pilot program prior to COVID, which was really exciting. And then COVID. I think that's everyone's response, right? And then COVID. But we are a designated employer as well. So it's forced us, which I absolutely love, because it used to be, we'll just post the job, Kelly. We'll just post the job, Kelly. And it's like, yes, we are posting jobs. That's great. Not everyone has access to a computer. And part of our mandate is to reflect the communities that we serve. So if you're just posting on this one job market that is going to be that homogenous group of people, then you're not going to reflect the communities that you serve with people that you work with. And so we are working with different organizations, getting into the communities, doing job fairs, sitting on panels, doing all of these different things to, try and get those people in to work with us. So we are trying to reach out rather than just post a job and be done with it, because as I'm sure everyone here has experienced on the employer side anyway, is that we are always short-staffed. We continue to be short-staffed, and that stresses our people out. And so we try to make the recruitment experience really enjoyable for people. I've changed the way that I do interviews. Yes, we have to have structured interviews with structured questions and make sure the competencies are met. And tra la la la. Yes, that's great. But I've started leading off my interviews with questions that people are passionate about. So when I'm doing screening or when I'm doing those interview processes, like, well, what's your favorite food, or what's your favorite show to binge watch? And, what do you think, what do think about this sports team, or, what makes you passionate? And I find that once you get people talking about the things that they really, really care about, that's when you're going to see their true personality come out. And then they're going to be a little bit more comfortable in that interview and hopefully work through it with you. I'm not always in their interviews, unfortunately. So I'm trying to coach our management team to do that too, because they get very rigid because they want to make sure that they take their notes and they have their points. So I try to say, it's really not, it's not supposed to be a stressful situation. If you're stressed, they're going to be stressed. So just take a breath and chill out and try and get them talking. But no, I find all of those things are, the biggest things that have changed during COVID.
So same thing. My panelist peers here are brilliant and have nailed so much of this already. And I think, since I am the professional association, I think, how it's affected my role is kind of boring comparatively, because I just basically have to figure out if people would prefer to go to things virtually or in person. So for me, not too much. It has changed a bit in terms of some of the resources that I want to provide. So for example, if you're not in HR in your day-to-day and things like that, you just don't get the challenges that HR professionals go through. Just like I would, I have no idea what a stressful day is like for an engineer, so I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but I recently did a virtual keynote with a really awesome HR coach and consultant. And it was so popular. Nick, I don't think you were registered for that one, the HR for HR? No. Okay. So what it really highlighted for me, and that's really what it was about, was creating this safe space for HR professionals, because we are burnt out, y'all. We are tired. We have been the ones taking the emotional baggage on from everybody else while we carry our own. Oftentimes through COVID, my caseload was full of people who were just completely unable to leave the house, let alone work, because they had no childcare. I was often the only adult person they would speak to for a week when I would check in to speak with them, So yeah, I'm going to spend an hour on the phone with you because you've heard nothing but children's TV programming this whole day and you just need some adult time, So it really ramped up that part of, that joke about HR being the unofficial therapist in the office. We were also the voice of adults for lots of our people, but I think one of the biggest things that I see, if I can give you that kind of overarching scope, is and you guys, I think, touched on it a bit, but the just the shift in the motivation, it really did cause people to go home and reevaluate, what do they want out of their careers and how do their careers fit into their life? And I know I was very much a part of that. I burnt out because I was super passionate about what I did. And I loved it so much that I didn't realize until it was too late that I was burnt out. So cautionary tale, love what you do, but don't give yourself fully to it 100%, because you have lots of other important things in your life that you need to be able to show up for as well. And I think that's what we're seeing. And what we're seeing is that's forcing, I think, employers to have to reconsider, what does a really great, ideal, successful employee even look and feel like now? I think, Nick, I know you do a lot of research into things like quiet quitting and the changes in that employee profile and things like that. And it's really scary, and you boil it down to essentially what people are doing is making this approach of, I am very happy to fill my cup up and do my job and do it to the best of my ability and nail the things you need me to nail, employer. What I'm not willing to do anymore is consistently give myself to you more than I do anything else in my life, and so that's really scary for employers, because for a long time, we really had to we got into the habit. I think we got a little too comfortable relying on our people pleasers, I'll say, our people who, and not just, people pleasing, but also just really career oriented, driven people as well. The people who are willing to step up and consistently go above and beyond. And that's wonderful. But I think we forgot along the way for lots of employers that that's extra. You call it above and beyond because it's implying that it's not part of the regular realm. And unfortunately, we came to rely on that a bit too much as part of the regular realm. And so now we're going, wait, what? People just want to do what they're contracted for? That's scary, So when you frame it that way, it's kind of like, well, how dare you actually, employers, because what we need to do, in that management sense and in that employer sense now is really get to that comfort place of, that's okay. It's not on our employees anymore to step up and do more than they are contracted to do. It's on us to look at that and say, why why are they consistently having to do so much more? Why are they showing up and looking exhausted every day? You know, my team used to make fun of me. They could always tell when I was having a stressful day because my hair would always be like this and I'd always be pushing it out of my face. And so I learned to try not to do that. But what was making me show up and, you know, have crazy cat lady hair every day, you know, and you intrinsically take that in as, you know, a new leader in an organization as well. And what that does, the knock-on effect is it starts to make you feel like, even though you've been working until 11 p.m. every night, 9:30 every night, you start to question whether or not you're doing enough. You always feel like you could be doing more because you know the second they need something and no one else is available, it's going to come to you. So I think that's an uncomfortable space for employers to be in, for employees to feel more empowered to say, I love this job. I love what I do. I'm just not willing to always be giving you more of myself than you have contracted me to give. And it's forcing us to have to reevaluate workloads and how we build our teams. And of course, that makes it even harder because now that the job market is so tight and so competitive, we want to be able to fall back into old habits. We want to be able to ask those people to step up, and that's just not really fair anymore. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what it looks like. You know, we're hearing a lot about what employers are doing in terms of compensation, perks, and things like that, and work-life balance that they can provide for new employees and attracting them that way. But I think that's what we're going to see is so much more of a shift in not just those benefits and perks, but, you know, that's all well and good. That's wonderful. Pay me a lot, give me good time off. But at the end of the day, and I can speak from experience working for a top employer who just gave us things up the wazoo. At the end of the day, if I'm worked so hard that I am exhausted and I just don't even want to leave my house or do anything on the weekends, then it doesn't matter how much great stuff you're giving me. If fundamentally the work you're expecting me to do is exhausting me, then I can't even enjoy all those great benefits and perks you're giving me anyway. So they become a bit more of a token piece of, you know, something to tick a box. So it has to be really genuine, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see how workplaces change as employers learn to become comfortable with that, because, you know, that knee-jerk reaction is, oh my gosh, they're not going above and beyond. Well, they're checking out. It's presenteeism. They don't care about their job. It's like, well, no, they do. And actually, they don't mind stepping up and going above and beyond sometimes. It's just that COVID has forced us to reevaluate and realize that that got to be the norm. And no wonder we're all exhausted and burnt out. And I feel like I'm such a hypocrite because I think we are so guilty of this in HR. You know, we did that session creating that safe space for HR professionals to get back to, I think, the point I completely lost initially on the virtual keynote. But what that highlighted for me is that we still have work to do in the HR space in particular to let you guys know that, like, hey, it's okay that you need care and support too. And it's okay that you're tired, you know, because we are the ones who take that on from everybody else. And so it's kind of like, who does that for us though? You know, so and so that's my mission, is to build some more programming in this year. And that's how it would have changed my role specifically, is versus just the traditional, you know, here's some professional development to give you more skills to make you even better in your HR career. I also want to look at providing things to say, your employer, you're never going to find the safe space at your employer in the same way that you would with your HR community, just because, again, like, your managers don't connect that same way. It goes back to the thing I said about, like, I don't know how to do that for engineers. I don't expect my operations team to know how to do that for me in my capacity as HR. So how can I provide that for our HR professionals who are still showing up every day, even though they've been burnt out forever too? And it seems the new normal is just a bit of that exhaustion. And so I see that as, you know, our professional association now isn't just about your professional development. It's also just about your own enrichment and your own support in your chosen profession, and making sure that you've got a safe space to land at the end of the day too. So I think that's it.
Thank you. So I'm just going to pause on the questions for myself for now, so that we do have some time for students to ask questions in the room. We would love to hear from you. If anyone had any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone just so that people online are able to hear. And it can be a question for all of our panelists or directed at one person specifically if you'd like. Any questions? No. Okay, perfect. I'll continue on with my list here. I just wanted to give that moment just in case. what is one practical, tangible piece of advice that you would give to our students who are all, graduating sooner rather than later most upon entering the workforce, whether they're entering HR or something completely different, just one piece of advice for entering the workforce?
My advice would be, and it goes back to some things we've already talked about, but when you are applying for jobs and then as you are engaging in the recruitment process for a job that hopefully you want to get and that you are offered, everything you're doing, it's a combination and it's representing you. So, if you're hearing from someone and they're emailing you to say, I'd like to set up a phone interview, getting back to them as soon as you're able and really looking over that communication. Is it, are there typos? Have you just those simple things, because you are setting a tone and you are presenting yourself at every step in that process. So my advice is just to be conscious of it and do it in a meaningful, intentional way, sort of at every step. Take that extra few minutes to really review your resume. One cover letter and one resume does not necessarily fit all. And I know that means it's more time consuming, but it is impactful. So, the skills you've listed on one resume, it doesn't mean you're forging anything or fudging anything. You are simply looking at the job at hand and saying, well, this is saying that, recruitment is the biggest piece of the role. And so I'm going to really, tailor my resume to take pieces that are, relatable to recruitment and really focus on those. But perhaps you're also applying for more of a customer facing admin position, for example, in which case you want to center more on those skills. So I would just say, tailor, be intentional, and just be very careful about the communication, because that all plays a part in then the decision that gets made.
I have an interesting response for this one, simply because I've been listening to an Oprah podcast, and one of her favorite guests is a Zimbabwean lady who was married off at 14, but ended up getting a PhD from one of the most remote places in Zimbabwe. And well, when you think of if your Oprah's favorite guest, this is a lady that has interviewed 35,000 people, including one of the best orators that we probably will see in our lifetime in Barack Obama. But anyway, the lady Terai Trent said, you know what, when you have the dreams, you need to connect them to the betterment of community that will mean more. And that for me spoke to what I do and the work that I do, but also who I am as a person. When you think of one tangible thing to do, I always think of exploring those passions and finding your purpose. A lot of people have done that, but like you mentioned it, Kelly, when you interview someone, you're like, what do you like? What kind of food do you like? Or what, like if you're excited about cars or robots, and then you start applying to a company that's dealing with robotics, there's that, I see the conviction, and I talk to a lot of people when we're recruiting, like I see the conviction when someone's like, I want to be an events manager, and every weekend I plan this little thing for my friends and stuff like that. Like you see them just talking about how they're going to do that job, and you can't put a price to it. There are some things that you can't train someone to do. And I feel like, especially when you've explored your passions, we talk about burnout, but I find, let's say Tuesday, I did nothing. It was a chill day. I was like, you know what? I got to take back my time. But I have those moments when I'm like, okay, this is when I know my back is against the wall. I have to push. And I give it my all because I know this is something I'm passionate about, right? Again, I'm also one of those. Recently, Beyonce Knowles put out a song, You Won't Break My Soul, and I sing that often, So I'm like, you know what, there's a point where you reach, and like I said, we're here for a good time, not a long time. So I always feel like, you know what, I will do the things that I want to do, and I will do the things that I enjoy doing. One of the reasons I walked away from accounting was that it was a wonderful paycheck, But I was like, I just can't do it. I could be crossing the street and then I get knocked down. And then like, what will I look back and say, oh, you know what, it was a great paycheck, but I didn't enjoy what I did. So exploring those passions, whatever it may be. I've also looked at like different resumes where someone has had leadership roles in like community organizations. And I'm like, okay, I have a role that potentially you could be able to do, because maybe they want another role and there were barriers, they couldn't get promoted and things like that. But then you notice the other experience of like, this is something that they really love and like the impact that they've had. Recently was hiring for a fundraiser, and there was someone who raised over $100,000. And it's like, do you know how hard that is to do? And I was like, if you did that when you weren't even paid to do it, think of when you're paid to do it. All right. So it's when you explore those passions, sometimes it makes it a lot easier. And one other thing, I was told one, anyway, two. I treat interviews as conversations. As at the end of the day, people just want to know if they can work with you. By the time you sit in that interview, they already think you can do the job. They're assessing if, you know, again, you think of like collaboration and different things like that. So, and I've had conversations with employers around someone comes and it's like, I need 10 years experience doing this job. And it's like, what? Like if someone did it for 2 years, can they be able to do the job? It's like, yeah, then why ask for 10, right? Those are some of the barriers we face, but you know, there's so many other things that can be taught on the job. But going back to the point of exploring your passions, when there's something I don't know, and even to this day, there's some things where I'm like, I don't know how to do this. HR school didn't prepare me for this, but I'm like, Google, and you will find it. And you will find it. It's a wonderful resource that people always put out something out there. So, you know, like you said, Annie, like leaders, like you don't know, you don't have all the answers. And if you do, that would be scary, because like, I don't think anyone ever has all the answers, but humbling yourself and being like, I don't know how to do this, maybe even ask someone else who knows how to do that. But yeah, I may go on, but like I said, I don't even have wine. But yeah, over to you, Kelly.
Next time, I actually was just going to break for a second. We just have a few moments left, but we had a question come in from online. So maybe you two could answer that question if that was all right. Perfect. And we just have about 3 minutes left. What advice would you give to someone who likes working with people, but are not so sure about if human resource management is for them?
I'm going to do it. I'm going. What I would say as a person who really likes people and who wasn't sure if human resource management was for them, was I spent a lot of time reaching out to professionals in the field for mentors to better understand what they did, what the different routes I could go were, what they did day to day. I think that that's the best way to understand whether it's a company or a role or a career that you want to get into. Talking to people who have already done it and can give you advice, like practical advice, because exactly what Jonah had already said here is that HR school does not prepare you. we learn a lot, but no, it doesn't prepare you for the day-to-day and for human behavior. So talk to human beings who have done it, and I think that will teach you a lot.
Yeah, I think I would echo definitely that is, you know, get those opinions, because HR as a function is huge. You know, I think I talked earlier about me having to step back and evaluate if I really liked what I was doing anymore, and I'd sort of forgotten about the fun parts. Because for me, there's a lot about governance, for example, that I find very interesting, and I'll get, you know, elbowed by my team for being the HR nerd and things like that. But it's very complex and it's very dry, and it's the last thing any of the operations managers want to talk about, even though they know it's really important. So I know going into that room when I've got 10 minutes, that really I've got 30 seconds before they just completely shut down and don't want to listen anymore. So I think you really, you know, want to explore all of those different HR functions, because now that I'm, back more in the realm of learning and development, I remember that HR is really fun again. And, it's not just the disciplinary process. It's not just applying the recruitment program. And I think it can be very easy, especially when you're going into those frontline positions, for it to feel like that. And the reality, I think, with HR is that sometimes, you kind of have to grow your career a bit to get into the really cool, meaty stuff. So if there are aspects of HR that you're interested in, but you find that those frontline kind of day-to-day people-oriented roles are not for you in the long run, then consider that. And then consider, what can you take away from that? What's the value? Because if there are parts of HR you really want to grow into, then how can you shift from, just focusing on what you're doing with the people to how can you use that opportunity to develop the skills you need to get into the parts of HR that you do find really interesting. And I guess at the end of the day too is, you guys are so young and fresh and you're just starting your careers right now. It's okay if you find out that maybe HR isn't for you, we'll be a little bit heartbroken privately, but that's okay. I keep going back to, my story of like I thought, I come from a generation where it's ambition for ambition's sake, the trades are a bad word. You don't go to that. You only go to those if you're not smart enough for university, And so you had to keep growing your career, because if you're not constantly trying to progress, well, then you must be stagnating and you must just not really have any ambition whatsoever. So it was such an all or nothing approach that we were brought into. And so it was really hard for me, to get to a place where I didn't feel like an enormous failure because it turns out that I'm not a leader and I don't like it, And so I think it's learning to be okay with whatever you decide works for you. And if, just because you've spent some time in a school program for that, I spent my time at the Mount thinking I was going to go into tourism, and look where I am now, So it's okay to change direction and consider a different approach at the end of the day if you discover something isn't quite for you.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thanks. And if anyone is looking to connect with our panelists, I have all the contact information. If you have questions that come up after, please reach out. And just a reminder that if you are part of the Learning Passport program, Professor Deal has a sign-up sheet. So please just quickly write your name on the sheet before you leave the room, okay? And don't forget to fill out the Moodle survey online within 2 days of this panel, okay? Thank you. Thank you all so much.